Hello and welcome to another video where today I'll be taking you through 6 different ways in which you can study the AAT qualification and the pros and cons of each. Now I know what you're probably thinking, how can there possibly be 6 ways to study AAT? But I can assure you, although some are subtly different, there are genuinely 6 ways you can approach this. Now I've not put any cost to these because prices will vary depending on provider, where you're sitting your exams, and the fact that prices do change. However, what I can say is that I've put them in overall cost order, starting with the cheapest, going up to the most expensive. There is a caveat to this to say I'm talking generally before someone goes off and finds some one-off deal that makes one option happen to be cheaper than another. Okay, let's get into it then with number 1 then, which is self-study. Now there's 2 versions of self-study, but number 1 is like the absolute bare minimum self-study, and that's going to be buy textbooks and that's it. Now you'll still have to pay for your exam fees to sit your exams, and you'll have to pay for your AAT student membership. But other than that, you would literally just have the cost of buying your books. Now the obvious benefit to this method is that it's the cheapest, and you do have an incredible amount of flexibility because you can basically do whatever you want, literally whenever you want. Now there are some obvious pretty big cons to this method, which is that you've got no tutor support at all, which when you're learning something brand new is pretty hard. And you've also not really got any sort of structured timeline to work towards, and you're limited to the amount of practice material you'll have access to. Now, second on my list is self-study, but with a twist. Now there are distance learning providers out there which offer a self-study option. So they won't offer tutor support with it being self-study, but it should give you some kind of structure and guidance as to how best to complete the course. Now if you're looking to keep costs as low as possible, this would be a better choice than the first one. I actually wouldn't really recommend anyone doing the first option unless you've got someone who you can actually rely on to answer any questions for you, because it is a very technical subject. Now I said the benefits for doing option 2 is that you should be getting better guidance, but you should also have access to more material, and a good provider should give you access to their online content in the form of a learning platform. This will have additional questions for you to work through, which are always going to be one of the best ways to get exam ready. The major downside with this option is that you still don't get tutor support, and unless you're an absolute natural, the chances are you will need help along the way. Now the third option is distance learning. Now distance learning should offer a far more in-depth course approach than self-study, and although not all distance learning courses are created equal, as a bare minimum, this should come with all the resources you require to pass your exams and the addition of tutor support. If you do not get proper tutor support, then it is not a distance learning course, you're just back to self-study. Now, if you go with distance learning, you'll be registered to that particular training provider, and you'll also be provided with a course structure, an individual learning plan, and a multitude of resources to work from. These should include textbooks, an online platform, additional practice materials, and if they're good, some videos and additional mock exams. Now, the major benefits of learning through distance learning are that you can fit the study around you, so you can complete the course as quickly or as slowly within reason as you want. You also have the enormous benefit of being able to ask tutor questions for areas you don't understand, and you'll get guidance throughout the course. Now, distance learning courses are extremely popular options when studying AAT, with the fact that you get a course structure and tutor support, but usually for a lot less money than the 5th and 6th options that we'll go through. Now, the fourth way of studying AAT is another variation of distance learning, which is distance learning with some online live classes. Now, this option has all the same aspects of distance learning, but with either weekly or bi-weekly live classes. Now, these will take place over a meeting or webinar software where you'll be able to dial in and have some live input from a tutor. Now, the obvious benefit to this method is that you will get some live teaching, which is always nice. However, for most providers, this will be more of a supplement than a replacement. So just be aware that if you're picking this option with the hope that your input yourself will be decreased. Because you've got that tutor, I would recommend being cautious. If you're picking distance learning, there will always need to be that level of ownership of your own learning, regardless of whether you pick the option of online classes or not. Now, the fifth option is a blended approach, and this might not be one you can necessarily pick because the decision may be made for you. So the blended approach involves you having some classroom lessons and some online live sessions. And this can be a really good option, particularly for those doing an evening class where you maybe have one session in class and one from home, because it's not always easy to attend a centre twice a week. Now, the big upside to this method is that you do get a lot of input from a tutor, so you can ask questions as you go through and you can work together with other students, which is something that's shown to be really beneficial. Now, the two downsides are that one, you're stuck to a schedule. Now, this might be fine for you, but it does mean that if you miss a session because of illness or holidays, whatever it may be, you'll need to catch up or you'll end up falling behind, which, trust me, from witnessing it before, it can be quite a challenge to then catch up. Now, the other negative to this method is cost. Now, this option will usually come with an increased cost, particularly at level 3 and 4. So the difference for level 2 might not be as much, but for level 3 and 4, there will usually be a more significant difference in cost. Now, the sixth and last option is your classic classroom option, where you attend a class in either a college or private training provider every week. This can either be done during the day or in an evening if you pick a night class option. Now, I think everyone is aware of how classroom works, but basically you'll be given a schedule at the start of your course with the number of lessons for each unit, your exam dates throughout the year, and the scheduled breaks if there are any. Now, the benefits and drawbacks are very, very similar to the blended approach, just enhance positives and enhance negatives. So the engagement with your tutor will be even higher, and the same goes for interactions with other students. The negatives being that you are still stuck to a very rigid schedule, so falling behind can be quite problematic. For me, I would seriously recommend this method or blended for anyone who really struggles with self-discipline. And I'm not saying that as a big negative about you as a person, it's simply about knowing yourself. Now, I did my AAT attending a classroom, and I've taught in classroom, I've taught blended, and now I teach through distance learning. So I've seen all sides of it, and you can clearly see the positives and negatives for each method. One other thing that I think is worth considering, and this is specifically on level 4, is that when you're attending a classroom, there's a strong possibility, unless it's a really large centre, that you won't be able to pick your optional units. They're 9 times out of 10 picked for you. So if there's 2 you really strongly want to do, I would check first with the provider which 2 it is they're planning on doing. Now, the last point is obviously doing it through classroom method will be more expensive, which should be obvious. You're getting more direct inputs. The costs for the business or college are higher, and therefore they need to be covered. It's fairly straightforward in that sense. All I would say is not to base your decision purely on cost. Make sure whichever method you pick is right for you, and remember it is an investment rather than a cost, because by achieving the qualification, it will easily pay off any money you've paid out in the future. And that does wrap up this video on the 6 ways you can study AAT. I hope you found it useful, and remember, if you have, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more accounting content. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.